City, police charging a 23-year-old man with a hate crime because of this.
People are in fear because of their faith. In fact, there have been 2 days of attacks on the Jewish community here in Southern California.
Every available unit in the city needs to get here now.
Shots rang out just before 10 a.m.
We're under fire. We're under fire.
The chaos unfolding at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh.
So there was one time after a town hall at student government where, tensions were very high. The entirety of student government hated Zionists. I was a Zionist. I had spent a year just having everyone on student government just look at me and stare. It was a little bit brutal. And after this meeting, I'm talking to the vice president of NYU, and slowly one anti-Israel student comes up, and another, and another, and another. And next thing I know, there's about 3 rows of kids. The first circle around me, the second circle around me, the third were kids on chairs looking up from above. Everyone with their phones out, yelling disgusting things about how Zionism is the original form of oppression, how I'm a white supremacist trying to bring that ideology to NYU. And the worst was one girl who actually ended up being president next year. One of them said, I was intellectually dishonest, and that thank God that I'm so proud of my Judaism and my Zionism, that thank God that everyone knows me as that Jewish Israel girl. Because just like every Nazi SS officer that was so proud of their rank, not even I can hide from what I am. And when I realize that I'm on the wrong side of history, it'll follow me forever. And they started chanting, "What side are you on?"
Most blanket, and the most simple way to put it, it's the hatred of the Jewish people.
And so anti-Semitism itself, I think, and I tend to define it this way, is primarily a political response, a desire to deny Jews political and civil rights.
Anti-Semitism is denying opportunity. Anti-Semitism is having double standards. And anti-Semitism is taking the Jewish people and holding them to a standard that no one else is held to.
It actually manifests as a conspiracy theory, specifically a conspiracy theory to do with notions of Jewish power, control, and domination.
So it's really hard. And so I tend to be much more focused on thinking about behavior.
Whenever anyone has an issue, Jewish people are the easiest people to go to, because you can kind of take any idea that you hate and place it onto them.
Many of the things that people who are labeled anti-Semites said about Jews, many Jews said about themselves. And many of the graphic images of Jews with like big noses or whatever, there are Jews who use those same, who believe those same images and reproduce them.
A man was stopped at the door of a South Florida synagogue recently. Then police say he left feces outside, spat at a menorah.
We live in a world where hate is easy.
And Jews are the most targeted religious group in America, says the FBI, and it's getting worse.
We've seen an alarming increase in hate crimes across the country, many targeting members of the Asian American Pacific Islander and Jewish communities.
But I think what's changed, and what's really changed since 2016, is a kind of boldness in which these people who previously existed in relatively hidden places and circulated their words in limited publications, they have come out of the closet, as it were.
And one of the things is also not to lose the fact that today, in the last 4 years, all forms of hatred are up. Racism, racism and violence against blacks and brown people, these are all things we're seeing. And they're not completely separate. They have each a strand, but it's part of an uptick in hatred, violence, and violent racism. So we note that anti-Semitism is a long and unique history to it, but it also has been unleashed in the last few years to the degree we've never seen in in the last 50 years.
After our review and our statistical analysis, we found that there were approximately 4.2 million anti-Semitic tweets promulgated during the time period covered. We also were able to estimate that those were disseminated by approximately 3 million unique Twitter handles.
And I think we saw, like, Charlottesville was one of the classic moments where, Charlottesville, there was a pro-Nazi march against blacks, against Jews, and President of the United States could not, in a full-throated voice, condemn it. He said there were good people on both sides.
In that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
Well, honestly, when Nazis come to march in one's town, there are not good people on both sides. One is a force for violent extremism. And when there's a sense that violent extremism is going to be in some level tolerated and made morally equivalent to other forms of organizations, it leaves open the doorway to more expressions of hatred, bigotry, and racism and anti-Semitism. And I believe that's what's been well documented in the last 4 years.
Do you think that Trump's election in the United States in 2016 had any effect or impact on anti-Semitism?
I absolutely think it is about Trump. I think it is about the enabling of, I think it is about the fact that he is enabling and listening to and blowing dog whistles. They're not even dog whistles. They're kind of winks and nods at people in the alt-right and extreme right in a way that it has become okay.
Any Jewish people that vote for a Democrat, I think it shows either a total lack of knowledge or great disloyalty. All right?
Disloyalty, okay. Well, that was Donald Trump yesterday, and many Jewish groups condemned Trump, including the Anti-Defamation League and the American Jewish Committee. But some Jewish Republicans insisted the comments were not as bad as they sounded. Dual loyalty accusations being a hallmark of anti-Semitism going hundreds of years back.
But from my observation, what I see is that he came into office with a very specific base. And that is a base that is fundamentally racist.
USA! 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 USA!
The crowd was chanting USA. He was pointing to reporters and saying, Jew-SA. We have seen a lot of anti-Semites and racists and misogynists who support the Trump candidacy.
Wow.
Would you call that man deplorable?
And while he himself, I mean, it's obviously one of the weird ironies of this, has Jewish family members, including a daughter who's an Orthodox Jew, in trying to keep that base loyal and active, has had to engage in both subtle and not very subtle rhetoric that calls out Jews.
Donald Trump has unleashed some dark forces in our society. He's given them a green light. Now, in general, by and large, predominantly, overwhelmingly, those dark forces are directed at Muslims, Arabs, and Mexicans.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
Those are the three prime targets of Donald Trump. And he personally will not want to unleash the anti-Semitism, A, because he already has Jews in his family, and B, because some of his biggest backers now, like Sheldon Adelson, are Jewish. So it would be suicidal for him to be fomenting anti-Semitism. However, he is fomenting all sorts of bigotry, and in that process, some of the anti-Semites in the woodwork, they have come out.
There's a very long history of anti-Semitism being used as a political tool to achieve certain political agendas. And I think today you have people who are using that very effective tool in order to achieve their various political and social agendas, right? These include, unfortunately, I think our president, whose behavior in this regard has been troubling, certainly, but it really includes politicians, I would say, on both sides of the aisle, who have, in different times, have invoked or have used certain anti-Semitic tropes and stereotypes, as part of their kind of political rhetoric.
Specifically, Margie Q's claim that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's mask restrictions for the House are akin to the Holocaust, the actual one during World War II.
They're looking to pass a resolution, Sandra, where Congresswoman Omar is not officially condemned, but this is a way for leadership, including Speaker Pelosi and the Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, to officially brush back the Congresswoman who has said recently that she thinks Israel has hypnotized the world.
So you sort of mentioned social media and the idea about misinformation. And so what has been social media's role in the spread of this hatred today? And is it a positive or negative impact?
Media is really one of the most effective propaganda tools probably in world history, right? You are able to reach masses of people relatively quickly and cheaply, right? Once upon a time, to reach the kind of audience that people are able to reach with a viral message today would require a Super Bowl ad-sized budget, right? Which was obviously only something that very wealthy people or corporations could afford. But today, somebody producing anti-Semitic content can reach hundreds of thousands, even millions of people without investing much time, money, or energy at all. Because these things are viral, and you can kind of leverage the masses to help these messages spread.
The largest proliferation of anti-Semitism is online, not actually in person. But you have, platforms like Facebook, which have allowed a number of very extremist views, including Holocaust denial, to pervade their hatred of Jews online.
I'm just a comedian and an actor. I'm not a scholar, but one thing is pretty clear to me. All this hate and violence is being facilitated by a handful of internet companies that amount to the greatest propaganda machine in history. The greatest propaganda machine in history. Let's think about it. Facebook, YouTube, and Google, Twitter, and others, they reach billions of people. The algorithms these platforms depend on deliberately amplify the type of content that keeps users engaged. Stories that appeal to our baser instincts and that trigger outrage and fear.
We've seen the ways that white supremacist groups, for example, have targeted young people both on social media, but also increasingly through channels such as multiplayer online gaming. Right, has become really a major place for recruitment into white supremacist and anti-Semitic ideologies, and has really become a way for bad actors to spread their propaganda.
I think social media has been a massive contributor to this for a number of reasons. A, social media, just being behind a screen, makes it a lot easier for anyone to say anything with way fewer consequences, especially if it's an anonymous account. Someone can really say what's been on their mind all along, maybe, without hesitation, without fear of consequence. It's also been an easy way for people with like-minded ideas, and in many ways that can be productive, but for people with like-minded ideas to come together and share those ideas. So someone who may have been secretly anti-Semitic just 10, 15 years ago is suddenly realizing there are other people who have that same idea and same thoughts that I do. Let's all team up together.
And in some sense, seeing anti-Semitic rhetoric and ideas on social media platforms is nothing new. It's just a new version of an old occurrence. Now, on the other hand, the speed at which these ideas can spread on social media is something new and incredibly alarming.
All right, popular social media video sharing app TikTok seems to be evolving to be used for far more than just sharing in awkward dance crazes. According to a new Israeli study, anti-Semites, Holocaust deniers, and other such extremists are taking advantage of the platform to reach young people and spread their hateful messages.
Facebook, Twitter, Google should be the ones that are preventing this hate speech from happening. I don't think that they should silence people, and everyone, we should maintain the freedom of speech of everyone. But when hate speech leads to violence, and they know exactly what we're talking about, this has to stop. And I don't buy the notion that they are helpless and that they're trying to promote some values of free speech. No one buys it. And you know why? Because their commercial interest, their stock prices is worth more than the human lives that are lost or at risk right now, the Jewish lives that they're not doing anything to protect. Their failure to act cost Jewish lives. The failure to protect us and listen to the consensus of the Jewish community that is telling them what is anti-Semitic or not is the one that is harming us. So the question is how much longer are we going to continue cleaning the blood off of synagogues' floors until social media networks are going to do something to stop it?
We do not want to become the arbiters of truth. I think that would be a bad position for us to be in and not what we should be doing.
Yes, social media is the source of all evil. I do think that social media has, when I'm comparing my own childhood, my own teenage years to today, to me, the thing that has changed is social media. That is the thing that has given a platform to all of these conspiracy theories, right?
In the beginning of July 2020, I saw on Twitter a hashtag being spread around of hashtag Jewish privilege, suggestion that Jews enjoy some sort of privilege because we're Jewish. That is even, a privilege that is even more in higher place in the hierarchy of social constructs than white people. This hashtag started in 4chan, which is an anti-Semitic. It's a platform that allows a lot of people in it without filtering, and it becomes a hub for white supremacists and neo-Nazis that actually plan to make this statement, that hashtag viral, and then it really became trending, and it was just horrific to see people using it and spreading this message. And I was terrified because I think as soon as I see something that has anything to do with Jews becoming trending on social media, I'm immediately afraid because we're in America, only less than 3% of the population are Jewish, and to be trending means that there's something wrong.
Polling data that we have, and the polling data goes back to like the 1930s, which is when the first opinion polls come out in 1935. And most of those polls most of the survey data shows that with education, hostile views of Jews goes down.
So much anti-Semitism derives from misinformation and disinformation simply because it is so difficult to disenfranchise and harm and persecute another group of people if you know the truth about them. If you know the truth about them, it's very hard to morally justify harming them. So I think that we have to fight against misinformation and disinformation, and that's what education is all about.
Education is everything, but when I say education, I also think about informal education and bridge building, right? Like, I know the only time I've changed my perception of a group is when I've met someone from the group, and I formed an intimate relationship with them, and I knew their story. So I think we need to do more to bridge build between let's call it white Ashkenazi Jews and Black Americans throughout our city. And a piece of this is also lifting up the voices of Jews of color, right? It's actually incorrect and dated to speak about the Black-Jewish relationship, right? As if to imply that by being Black, you're not Jewish. But we know there are many people who identify as being both Black and Jewish. And I think it's really important that we lift that diversity up and show the true face of the community, which is there are Latino Jews and Black Jews and white Jews and Russian Jews and Syrian Jews. And we need to push back at the notion that the Jewish community is all white and monolithic and look one way.
I mean, again, listen, there's certain people that you're never going to convince that they're wrong. And those people, you know, unless you like hitting your head against a wall for some reason, like you're not going to convince them. But I think, I don't know the percentages, but I think the vast majority of people, if they're educated, and education, by the way, doesn't just mean like facts and definitions. It means understanding people's stories and people's backgrounds and where people come from and the experiences they've had. I think most people, you can shift their views on things. You really can. And you can get, you know, I think most people are good. I think most people mean well. I think most people, you know, want the best for themselves and their families, and they're not looking to hurt anybody else. They just, you know, there's misinformation.
Because, you know, I don't think anybody's born hating or being racist. I actually think that is, that's learned behavior. And, you know, I think the way that we can connect the dots for people to see that bullying and hating someone who's different is the beginning of being able to see someone else as other, as enemy, as someone that is so, in some ways, against what you stand for, that they have to be literally physically attacked. I think we need to connect for Jews to see that anti-Semitism is not, it's unique in our history, but it's not unique among contemporary hate forms.
As far as the degree to which misinformation contributes to anti-Semitism, I think that it's absolutely central, much like misinformation is absolutely central to the perpetuation of racism, because so much of the hatred that is generated toward Jews is based on misinformation, blatant lies, intentional conspiracy theories that are meant to portray Jews negatively. And that's a real problem, because misinformation is, as we know, so incredibly difficult to fight.
You know, I primarily work now in my full-time job with college campuses. And we focus a lot on, you know, telling students that events that you're doing with juniors and seniors in college aren't really going to be super helpful. The people who are coming in through that door are already pro-Israel. The students who are coming in, who are freshmen and sophomores, are just curious. And it's your responsibility to teach them about, you know, Jewish people, to teach them about Israel, about all of those values, about fighting anti-Semitism. Because once people are older, again, you're not getting them through the door if they already hate you. Now, I think, you know, high school is a great age, because high school is when students not only have a historical background, but they also have a moral compass. They're educated. They have access, of course, to the internet to read whatever they want, and their moral compass will guide where they are. So the most important thing is to make sure that the youth are always open to hearing the other side, to make sure that our voices don't get lost when other voices are really loud.
Emma Lazarus, whose famous words graced the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty, right? Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, also said that none of us are free until all of us are free, right? You know, some decades later, Dr. King would say that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Justice is indivisible. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
I think one of the greatest moments in my professional career was working alongside Dr. King's lawyer and draft speechwriter, Dr. Clarence B. Jones. And he told me a really remarkable thing. He said that the success of the civil rights movement in elevating the conscience of the United States was enabled by the alliance we had with the Jewish American community. And that has always really inspired me. It really goes to show that when we stand together, we are incredibly powerful and are able to take down, the forces of evil that rise up against us.
I would still take a stand against anti-Semitism.
The whole world must see that Israel must exist and has a right to exist and is one of the great outposts of democracy in the world.
I speak to you as an American Jew. As Americans, we share the profound concern of millions of people about the shame and disgrace of inequality and injustice, which makes a mockery of the great American idea.
I think there's a moral component and an ethical component in question that Jews should be grappling with, and I think largely I hope are grappling with, which is that it's just the right thing to do, right? It's the moral position to recognize and help advance the civil rights and liberties of people whose rights have been denied to them.
And there should be no quid pro quo. There should be no, I'll show up for you, I'll fight for criminal justice reform, but you need a promise, right? It doesn't work that way. That's not how relationships are built, and that's not what it means to be Jewish. We do not place conditions on doing the right thing. You probably know that back in January, we, UJ Federation, with other organizations, led a march against anti-Semitism where we crossed the Brooklyn Bridge. And in that moment of organizing for the march, we reached out to our friends in all communities, including in the Black community. If they had said to me in that moment, okay, I'll march with you, but you better promise that you're going to show up in a march against racism, I would have been really upset, because it wasn't the time to start horse trading or being transactional. And that's not the response I got. The response I got was, great. Where will you be? I want to show up with you. I want to march with you. And indeed, we saw a diverse coalition of New Yorkers marching with us across the Brooklyn Bridge.
That's the idea of intersectionality, is minority groups uplifting each other and understanding the differences.
And so when you're asking, what can I do to prevent anti-Semitism? I think that if we look at anti-Semitism more broadly in a spectrum of rights, protecting the rights of minorities generally, protecting the rights of people whose rights are being deprived or trying to be taken away is also a way to prevent anti-Semitism.
The people who want to do our communities harm recognize the power of these coalitions. They recognize that when minorities stand together, when Jews build coalitions with Black Americans, with Asian Americans, with the queer community, with the immigrant community, and so on, we become the majority, and we have the political power to shape our country into one that is more equitable, into one that is more just, and into one that is more safe and welcoming and inclusive for all of our communities.
So I think that in some cases there are instances in which Jews asserting their rights as Jews, not in a way that's ambiguous or saying, we all deserve rights and the same rights, but asserting their rights, particularly as Jews, can enable other groups to gain rights.
Anti-Semitism animates anti-immigrant xenophobia, anti-Black racism, Islamophobia, and all of these other bigotries that beset our societies. We have to have a united front in order to fight all of these ugly things that undermine the well-being of our citizenry and of the human race more broadly.
So I visited a congregation in Fayetteville, Georgia. I'd never been there, and the president and the vice president of the synagogue said, "Rabbi, we want to show you something really amazing." So they drove me to the synagogue. I was going to give a speech there. They stopped in front of a sign on the street level, and they said, "What do you think of our sign, Rabbi?" And I said, "Well, it's a nice sign, but I don't really know what you want me to think. It's a sign. It's good." They said, "No, you don't understand, Rabbi. This is Klan country. We didn't put a sign in front of our synagogue until just a couple of years ago because we were afraid. But what changed? We built relationships with all of the different faith communities in our community, with the Catholic Church, the Protestants, the Muslims, the Hindus, the Buddhists. And we have built bridges of understanding and mutuality so that we feel safe putting a sign that says, we are here, we are Jewish."
With every new relationship, there's a potential to do something really amazing on really any level.
Allyship is very important.
This is a movement, which means that there are going to be all sorts of voices that are participating.
One of our jobs is to create more of that kind of community where they're interconnected and mutually responsible. That creates the sense that we're in it together. We stand with anyone who's the victim of hate or bigotry, and they'll stand with us when we are the victims. And we change the world in doing that. And I think that's what's being done in many places. We need to do more of it. And I look to the two of you to be helpful in helping to do that holy work. And I thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, here we go. For the motherland. Yeah, we gon' play it loud until they feel it, yeah. Yeah, we gon' blow the roof up off the building, yeah. Yeah, we gon' play that motherland bounce. Check it out now, motherland bounce. Check it out now, motherland bounce. We baba. Black and Yiddish, I've been with a Sammy Davis cousin. Tried to dodge the industry, but now my name is buzzing. They all saying that I'm conscious. I say that it's nonsense, so I say I've been on since on had an on switch from Seattle, the rainy city where my mom lived. In Jerusalem, the golden city that was conquered, but still we moving on.